Welcome to Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello and welcome to All Home Care Matters. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try to make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Now, on today's show, we're going to discuss the pros and cons of hiring a private caregiver versus a professional home care company. Let's talk about caregivers. If you have ever needed a caregiver, either for yourself or for a loved one, then you most likely had either hired them directly or you chose to hire a local home care company. Either way, hiring private caregivers on your own can be a full-time job, and knowing the risk and responsibilities of hiring a caregiver will help protect you if you decide that you're going to hire a private caregiver on your own. The first thing you need to do is to run full background checks on each potential caregiver you may hire. You will need to do the background checks yourself, or some of your local police stations will offer that service to you. It can be tempting to skip this step, especially if you're under the pressure for time, or maybe they were a referral from a good friend or family member that you know and trust, and you think it wouldn't be necessary. Whatever you do, don't. We're going to share a real life situation that happened, and it may be easy to dismiss this as a rare one-time thing, but sadly, we talk with families all over the state of Michigan, and I am sad to say these types of scenarios are much more common than they aren't. There was a family that we know that needed a caregiver for their mother, and they hired a person from their local church that had been going there for years. They knew him, they'd seen him at church functions, they went to similar events together, and they ran through the same crowd of friends, and they knew their family as well. Now, this person ended up stealing their mother's family jewelry, and once the family discovered it was gone, it was too late. They had no recourse, and they did not have any bonding or liability insurance. A simple background check could have given them this warning that this person had actually done something like this before. When a family or an individual hires an agency, they will perform full background checks, screenings, MVR reports, and they'll verify their references of employments. And they will also talk to families that they have serviced or other companies that they'd worked with to try to get a better understanding of who this person is. Some agencies also require drug testing. This ensures that you're bringing a thoroughly vetted caregiver into your home. And if you find the right caregiver and decide to hire them and you have performed a thorough vetting of them, then you have to decide how are you going to handle payroll. And then you need to consider what taxes need to be withheld, and this includes Social Security as well. You may decide to hire caregivers as independent contractors. This means that they have the responsibility to report income, but it's your responsibility to know what the minimum hourly wage is, overtime pay, and also what the laws are as it relates to independent contractors. And if you're going to hire them as independent contractors, it's very important to know what that entails and what you can and cannot do once that contract has been signed. There are very strict guidelines and can lead to difficulties down the road if they are not understood properly. Now, if paying the private caregiver, make sure that you know the current tax laws on hiring workers. And this can be easily be found by contacting your tax preparer or your CPA. Now, when hiring a professional home care company, they handle payroll taxes, they handle the workman's comp, the bonding, the insurance, and the home care companies comply with state and federal regulations with regard to employment practices and laws, so that the families don't need to worry about this while they're tending to the care of their loved one. Now, when a family hires a private caregiver, which then is essentially a private employee, make sure to have a good understanding of what you do in the event of fraud or theft or abuse or any of these negative, horrible situations that we don't even like to think about. Now, have a conversation with your family attorney. Talk to your insurance providers to ensure that you and your loved one is fully protected and insulated in the event that the private caregiver makes an accusation or they make a claim that they injured themselves caring for you or for your loved ones, or if they have taken part in an illegal activity. You want to make sure that your family is protected and that you understand all of the requirements going in. Now, these are all the human resource aspects that any person would need to look into when exploring the possibility of hiring a private caregiver or any sort of private household employee. Now, if you choose a company instead of a private caregiver, anytime there are accusations of abuse, exploitation, neglect, or any illicit activities, the company is responsible and they would open an active investigation into these accusations and they would proceed from there. Now, the complaints can come from either the family, the person receiving the care, or the employee providing the care. All complaints would be taken seriously, and it may take time to do a thorough investigation of the complaint, but the company will take it seriously and they will look into it immediately. Another thing to consider if hiring a private caregiver, remember, checking references is critical to making decisions about whether to hire a caregiver or not to. Make sure to verify any skills they may say they have or trainings that they've gone through and completed, any experiences with certain conditions or care that they've provided. Make and have a complete background and reference check so that you know exactly what the person is qualified or is not qualified to do. Now, states each have their own rules about what a caregiver can and can't do. Here in Michigan, for example, we're considered a non-licensed state. So that means anybody can be employed as a caregiver. However, that doesn't mean they should be employed as a caregiver. That also means that Michigan, there's no government regulation or oversight over the home care industry or the non-medical care industry. Home health care is regulated, and that's through Medicare, the federal level. But as far as home care in Michigan, it's not regulated. Now, with our company that sponsors this show, Enriched Life Home Care Services, they operate fully as they would if it was a licensed state to the best of their abilities. There's certain things you can't do because the government doesn't allow for that tool or that resource because we're non-licensed, but everything else is done to the T as though this was a regulated industry here in Michigan. And for us in Michigan, we hope it will become one soon. Now, for example, another state may allow a caregiver to dispense medication. In Michigan, caregivers are not allowed to dispense medication. So depending on where you're at, you want to have a clear understanding of what is allowed and what is not allowed in your state. How could an agency help? If you decided to take that route, an agency will check caregiver references and verify the experience they say they have and any other credentials. An agency would also be required to be compliant with the state regulations when applicable regarding tasks a caregiver is allowed to do. Many people underestimate the time and stress of managing privately hired caregivers. How do caregivers know what their responsibilities are? How do you give feedback to your caregivers? That call in the middle of the night from a caregiver who is calling in sick for the next day comes to you. And how do you replace a caregiver who is essential to the care of your spouse or family member? Are you or another family member prepared to cover that shift if there's no backup? Consider these possible scenarios. A caregiver doesn't show up. A caregiver quits without notice. A caregiver requests a schedule change. A caregiver complains about a task they have to do. These are all real scenarios that happen day in and day out, whether it's a company or it's a privately hired caregiver. Have backup plans in place. Now, when choosing to hire a professional home care company, the calls will all be going to the main office or to the after hours line, depending on when this event would occur, and it'll be handled by them. These scenarios, like we said, can and do happen to companies as well, and they have backup contingencies in place for these very things so that the individual who is receiving care is not left without care. If you choose to hire a private caregiver, you will want to prepare a backup plan in the event that your private caregiver calls off or is unable to work due to vacation, illness, a last-minute emergency, so that your loved one isn't without care. Yes, hiring a private caregiver can be more cost-effective when compared to a professional company in the short term, but in the long term, it could essentially cost more. And when looking at a professional company, you're also going to have professional case managers, the in-office support, and a team who can help as the care needs evolve and requires modifications, as well as protect the family and the person receiving care from any unforeseen circumstances that may arise. With a private caregiver, you act as and become the company, and you will be held responsible for all aspects of the private caregiver's employment. The risk to hiring a private caregiver is very hefty and outweighs the pros, but if you have the time and resources to do it the proper way, it can work as long as you are aware of all of the requirements, insurances, taxes, your state laws and regulations, and rules that apply for employment of a private individual. Now, we hope this episode has been helpful to you, informative, and insightful. If you know of someone in your family or a friend that may benefit from some of this information, these pros and cons of hiring a private caregiver over a professional company, please share it with them. All Home Care Matters is here to provide help, support, and answer any questions that you may have. Remember, you can visit us at our website at allhomecarematters.com. There's a private, secure, fillable form there that you can give us ideas, feedback, or show ideas. We will answer each one that we receive, and it's always private and secure. We hope you will join us next time when we talk about the sandwich generation. If you've heard that phrase before, you know the sandwich generation is caught in the middle, and we're going to talk about what the middle is next time on All Home Care Matters. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.